Hello and welcome, everybody. Today is a phenomenal Tuesday, and my name is Daniel Myers, developer advocate here at Snowflake. And we have a real treat today. We are going to be talking all about Python data engineering with Snowflake Notebooks. And with me today to talk about this is Jeremiah Hansen. Jeremiah, how are you today?
Hey, Daniel, doing well. Thanks.
Fantastic, fantastic. I am excited just to dive right in. So, but before we do that, tell me a little bit about yourself, Jeremiah. Who are you? How long have you been here at Snowflake? What are the things that you work on, and why are you an expert in this area?
Love to. So I've been at Snowflake now for 5 years. My background actually is all like in software engineering early on, and then data engineering, like the last 20 years in kind of various roles. I worked for Slalom Consulting for 9 years in Seattle. And at Snowflake, I started as a sales engineer. And then the last 3 years, I've been in the Field CTO team. And now I'm on the global team leading data engineering and data lake workloads. So spent a lot of time, everything from architecture, and then data engineering is pretty broad. So a lot around DevOps and data engineering with Python and notebooks and all of that. So looking forward to getting into especially the Python and notebook data engineering topic today.
That's awesome. And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the scope of data engineering is absolutely huge. So today, we're really focusing on data engineering with Snowflake Notebooks. We're going to be talking about how to deploy these notebooks through automated CI/CD pipelines. We're going to be actually building a Python data pipeline using a Snowflake notebook. And so, Jeremiah, tell me a little bit about, what are Snowflake notebooks? Why are they so special?
Yeah, for sure. So we've had Snowpark for a while. If you've been following Snowflake or your customer, you may have already been introduced to it. And we've had the ability through Visual Studio Code to, build Python pipelines. But what we haven't had, or until just recently, is a native notebook interface. So now that, same Python Snowpark work that you were doing maybe out in VS Code, or maybe you were waiting, I talked to a lot of customers who actually were waiting for us to have the native notebook capability before really getting into data engineering in Snowflake with Python. So I think that's what's really exciting for me about this is it gives customers just another way to work with Snowpark in a really easy way with notebooks.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so to reiterate, right, so this is a brand new Snowflake native implementation of notebooks. Allows you to run Python. We have our own Anaconda environment that you can have all of your various packages, but you can also run this inside of a container and bring your own special packages, be able to run directly on NVIDIA GPUs, things like that. And so what are some of the, so that gives an amazing mental picture of what we're talking about today. What are some of the reasons why somebody would use a native implementation of a notebook on Snowflake over something like VS Code or something like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it really depends on the experience of the teams. So I talked to lots of customers and lots of different groups within customers. And sometimes if it's a software development oriented team and they're building applications, they generally are working in VS Code or an IDE like that. And that's how they want to continue to work with Snowflake. But a lot of folks, especially on the data science side, that are like kind of hardcore data analysts that are building some of these pipelines, they want to work in notebooks and have that interactive. The nice thing about notebooks is you get that interactive ability where you can have cells, run a little bit of code, do something with it, then run a little bit of code again and do something else. And that's harder in the VS Code world and kind of the programmatic world. So it's really kind of a way to let folks, with different skill sets have the tool that they're familiar with and different experiences.
And this is just, plain notebook files, right? So you can just literally upload an existing notebook file that you have and just run it in Snowflake on the web interface.
Totally. Yep. And that's the beauty. It's just a regular IPYNB file that you can run in various, you can also open that up in VS Code or other tools and work with it as well. So
nice.
So it's a standard format.
So before we get into kind of hands-on demo of you walking us through this, I want to cover a little bit of the 30,000 foot view of this and really show the architectural diagram here that we have. And so walk me through this and kind of what it is that you'll be kind of building today.
Perfect. Yeah. So this page that we're looking at here, you can see the diagram. This is actually a quick start that we have where in detail outlining. So what I'm going to show you today, you can, as soon as we're done here, you can actually go through and do this yourself. So, and what I'll do is just quickly talk through this diagram and show you kind of what we're going to go through. So as I get into it and you're looking at the notebooks and things, you'll kind of keep this mental model of where we're at. And so the idea is we're going to build at a high level, we're going to build pipelines with notebooks. So I talked earlier about, you can do this with VS Code, but what a lot of customers do is they'll have, if they have other notebook, if you've used other notebooks in the past, is they'll build pipelines in a notebook and then schedule them to run. And so that's what we're going to do here as well. So you can see those two blue boxes there are two notebooks, with the 6 and 7 next to them. And what's going to happen is each of those notebooks is going to be a pipeline that's going to be responsible for creating a table. So generally, the best practice is to have a pipeline produce one table. I've seen it's kind of just a data engineering best practice. I do see a lot of notebooks where they're creating a lot of different tables and doing a lot of different things. But I think in terms of kind of development best practices and working with this is a good tip. And then, of course, as I say that, I'm violating my own principle because in this quick start, number 6, there actually creates 2 tables. So I guess, do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. But that's definitely the best practice. And then the second notebook just creates 1 table. So we're going to create those 2 notebooks. We're going to ingest some data from Excel and from our marketplace. And then essentially we're going to, ingest that raw data and then transform it. And then we're going to schedule those 2 pipelines, those 2 notebooks through our task capability, which is our native orchestration ability in Snowflake. And we're going to do all this with our Python APIs. And then the really fun part at the end here, I'll show you how to even put this into a CI/CD pipeline. So we'll actually deploy the notebooks through GitHub Actions from like a dev to a prod environment.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It's a lot, but
it is a lot. That is a tremendous amount. And so it's I think it's very helpful to have this architectural diagram to really show the flow of data, show exactly what we're going to be building, and what we're going to be walking through today. Now, one call out I want us not to miss is that, right? So you're going to be going through this with us right now live. And so anybody watching, this is truly a live stream. So as you're going through this, ask questions. We have people that are watching the list of questions going through, and they'll bubble up certain questions to different questions to us. So ask questions all the time, and we will be monitoring that. But also, this exact thing that we're building today is both a self-serve quick start. So if you want to build this yourself, you can do that here right now, and be able to walk through this quick start. So you're going to walk through this, parts of this quick start right now with us. And then the other thing is that if anybody watching today wants to get a true instructor-led webinar of this, you can literally register right here as well. So this whole live stream is to show you how to build this data pipeline in Python and Snowflake native notebooks. You can get hands-on self-serve with this quick start, and you can even register for an instructor-led webinar. So with that, I want to pass it over to you, Jeremiah. Walk us through hands-on building these data pipelines in notebooks.
All right, let's do it. I'll share my screen, and this, like Daniel said, this is live. So hopefully I went through it once before, so I'm hoping everything is going to be good, but you never know. That's the fun of it. All right, let me. All right, so I can't see you anymore, but can you see my screen?
I sure can.
All right, so we got the quick start up here that Daniel just showed. So I'm going to just run through, and let's actually start here in Snowflake. So this is Snowsite, our UI. I have a notebook open. So part of this quick start is actually the instructions. Some of the steps here are inside of a notebook, as you might expect. This is separate from those 2 pipelines we're going to build. This has sort of some of the setup steps. And what I've done before, we started this is I just ran these initial setup steps, which actually go through and they create a demo database and a role and some of those objects we need. And I'll show you here with this user. So I have two tabs here. I'm going to flip back and forth. One is going to show us this notebook here that's our, like I said, kind of helping us get through some of the steps with instructions. And then this is where we'll actually work as the data engineer. And you can see here in this databases, and let me zoom in one time. Is that large enough so you can see it?
That is large enough. Yes, that looks good. And I also love the fact that you're using dark mode. That's cool.
Yeah, that was fun at Summit. They had a fun kind of ending to I think one of the sessions with the dark mode.
Yep.
So yep, that's a great feature. So just to show you, there's no shenanigans here. I've got, and I'll refresh. I've created the schemas. So we have a dev schema and a prod schema, but as you can see, there's nothing in them at the moment. So we're going to be building out. What I'm going to show you here throughout this whole demo is is trying to get the point across of how to do these things. Not everything here is going to be the way that you'll do it as a customer in the real world. Like for example, you probably wouldn't have a single database with dev and prod schemas. You'll probably have either separate databases entirely or separate Snowflake accounts. So there's different ways to set up your environments in Snowflake. But the key thing is, however you do that, what I'll show you here will work. So in this case, I'm going to have a dev schema and a prod schema. And then I've already also set up some integration. So one thing I want to highlight here is our integration with Git. So this has been a very popular feature, very highly requested feature that we integrate natively with Git repositories. And so what we have available today is, you can see, I'll show you a few different aspects of this as we go through the day this demo. But this is showing I have an object created in my database here that's a Git repository, and it's connected out to GitHub. So I actually have, you'll see here, I've got this GitHub repository, and you can see the file listing here that I'm showing you. We have 4 folders and a handful of files here. That's the same listing that you can see here in the Snowsite UI. So this is pretty cool. You can actually browse the repository right through Snowsite. You can change branches, and I'll show you some other features as well, but cool integration with Git here. So with that, we've got kind of the stage set. We've got our schemas. We don't have any notebooks set up for those pipelines. So if I go to my projects and then to notebooks, you'll see that I don't have any at the moment. So let's jump in here now. And what I'm going to do first of all is I'm actually going to deploy. So first of all, start the notebook. So just to quickly walk through the notebook interface, if folks have used notebooks before, a lot of this will be similar. There's a lot of similarities between notebooks. But a couple things that are different here. I'm going to start the process. So with a Spark-based notebook, you connect to a cluster. In this case, we're going to connect to a Snowflake warehouse. And if you've used Snowflake before, our warehouses are incredible. Our warehouse is our compute environment, compute cluster. And these compute clusters start, when you start them, if they're stopped or you're resizing them, they happen for most sizes instantaneously, like sub-second. And what you see if you were paying attention there as I was talking, whatever that took, 5 or 8 seconds to start, the warehouse itself started immediately. And then what that 5 or 8 seconds was for a process to start on that warehouse and my notebook to connect to it. And the reason I wanted to highlight that is that's incredibly fast. A lot of the hosted solutions for Spark and notebooks, it still takes 3 to 5 minutes to get a cluster started and connected and all of that. And that translates into like a real headache and real time waste for customers and data engineers. So really powerful there. So I'm now connected. I'm going to run this section here, this little bit of SQL code. So our notebooks, like most notebooks, you can have SQL and Python and Markdown. So I have a combination of those. You can see I've done a naming convention here. So I put SQL or MD or PY for the name of my cells. And what this is doing, I want to highlight this feature. I'm actually deploying 2 notebooks into my development branch in my development environment, all through SQL. And this is really cool. So if you look at this command, execute immediate, this lets you actually run scripts inside of Snowflake that live in your Git repository. And so here in my Git repository, I've got this script called deploy notebooks. And I'll just actually show you here. I'll flip over to my GitHub repository. And if you look at the deploy notebooks script, hopefully that's readable. I can zoom in once. You can see that it's a SQL script with Jinja templating. So you can see here these little curly braces. That's actually a Jinja placeholder. So what I'm doing is creating a notebook. So you can see the SQL create or replace notebook. And I'm connecting to the right branch in my repo and the right notebook and creating those notebooks. And those notebooks live here in the repository. So you can see in this folder, I've got 2 folders, one for each notebook. And then each notebook contains that, we talked about this earlier, it contains that IPYNB file, and it contains an environment YAML file that defines which packages and which versions to use for that notebook. So let me show you this, and then I'll pause really quick. After this command ran, if I go back over to I'm logged in here with my demo role, and I hit refresh on the notebooks, you'll see that I have 2 notebooks now, the dev version of my notebooks. So I did that all through a script that I ran through this notebook, but this execute immediate command. And so with that, now I've got this actual, if I zoom in on this part, I've created those 2 notebooks here that we're going to look at now in detail. Let me pause, Daniel, real quick. Any questions from you or from the group on what I've done so far?
No, I think this is awesome. I think the ability to use execute immediate from is a very powerful feature. And I think and I also love the fact that you're able to have this native Git integration with Snowflake, right? Just like you said, I've seen it myself, so many requests to have Git integration, and I love that it's there. I love that we're able to show it off here. And so no questions, but really just, appreciation for where we're at now and seeing some of the features that you're able to show off.
Yeah, that is. I spent a lot of my time, I think I mentioned at the beginning, working with DevOps as part of my data engineering responsibilities. And this is definitely something that is asked for all the time. So let me open up the first notebook. Like I mentioned, we have, and actually before that, we're going to do one thing. So if we go back over here, one of the data sources we want to access is weather data. And one of the really awesome features of Snowflake is the ability to connect to our marketplace. And so Snowflake, is much more than a data warehouse. We always have been. And we've built part of the data cloud vision is that we can connect and share data and applications as well. And so just to show you with weather, so say you're working on a project that you need weather data for. There's all kinds of data sets in our marketplace. This particular one from our friends at WeatherSource was actually created for us for our demos. So Frostbite is a Snowflake demo that we do. And so this is a smaller data set, but WeatherSource also has complete weather data available as well. But to show you how powerful this is, I find the listing I want, I find the data set that I want to get, and I just can click on get. And then a few options here. I'm just going to change the name of the database, assign it to the right role, and I can click get. So basically 2 steps there. And now this data set's available to my account to access. And this is super cool. You don't have to create ETL jobs to bring the data from WeatherSource, through CSV files or whatever into your account, load it, refresh it, keep it up to date. As soon as they make changes to their data, it's available to me immediately. And I now have this available. If I refresh the databases, I have this Frostbite WeatherSource database now that's there and has all that data. That's pretty cool.
That is awesome.
So with that in place, now we're ready to run the first notebook. And if I go open up number 6. So again, notebook's going to load here. I'm going to start up the process, which connects to my Snowflake warehouse, which is the compute cluster. And just to refresh, what we're going to do with this notebook is we're going to read some data from Excel. So we have 2 Excel files out in S3, and we're going to load those into 2 tables that correspond to each file. So that's what the process is. And now that that's done, let me just kick off this and I'll talk through this first notebook. So we're doing some things as we go through here. You can access, this is a SQL cell. You can see it says SQL get context, and this is a Python cell. And you can access values from one to the other. So in this case, with the SQL one, I'm actually just doing a simple select query to get a database name and a schema name. And this is essentially just to kind of set some context. We're going to add the ability with notebooks to pass parameters to them, and then I could do away with this kind of little bit of code. But here, what I want to do is pass in that database and schema name, and then down here in my Python cell, I can access that exact. So you can see the SQL get context is this table of data from up here that I can access now in Python and use those values, and that can happen both directions. I can have values in Python that I access from SQL. So that part, then logging. So another feature of that we've introduced recently, now it's been available for a little while now, but is the ability to log and trace from within Python. So we set up a logger for this demo, and we can start logging different messages as we go through. So this is really showing how to instrument your code so that you can then, when you're in production or even during development, you can actually monitor what's happening. So it's an important capability. And then I had 2 Excel files, like I mentioned, that are out in this stage. So part of that setup that I did earlier was to create the stage, which is a connection out to S3. So I've got 2 Excel files, and then just a simple Python function that uses OpenPyExcel. So just want to show here that when you're doing Python development, you can use other Python packages. In this case, we're using OpenPyExcel, and I'm reading those 2 files one at a time from the stage. I'm opening them up with this library, reading the value of the worksheet, and then essentially writing that out as a data frame and to a table in Snowflake, as you can see there. And this is reusable, so I can call it for each spreadsheet. And then I just go through here and loop through and call each one twice. I call that function to load the data. And at the bottom, we do a show tables, and you can see that the location order detail table exists now and are ready for me to use. So very powerful. Kind of covered a lot of different capabilities here within notebooks.
Yeah, I love the scenario that you have here of seemingly something simple of loading Excel files into Snowflake, and I think and to be able to implement that in a Snowflake native notebook, that's pretty cool to see, and even the little things of grabbing the context of the previous SQL cell. I mean, that all of that is little pieces that you need to know to really build out a robust pipeline in a notebook. And so this is a great example.
Yeah, exactly. And to show you one other quick thing here on the left, you can see this is more of our Git integration. So this notebook, the first, with our Git integration, you get access to read the contents of your repository. With notebooks, you're actually able to also write into the repository. And eventually we're going to have more general support for writing. At the moment, it happens through the notebook, through notebooks. But you can see that here, I can look at, I'm in my dev branch. I can, up here on the top right, we'll do this in a second, but I've got some push to get options. So I've got native integration here in Snowsight in this experience as well. And I can also flip over and browse my database. So now you can see that I've got the 2 tables that we just created. So let me go through to the next notebook real quick. And this one's going to go quicker since I talked through a lot of the pieces that are the same. We have the same pieces here, like the logging information, infrastructure, and all that. Oops. And so let me run this. I'll highlight a few things that are different. The first part's basically the same. The second part, I wanted to show here, we have a Python API for working with Snowflake objects. So what a lot of customers would do in the past is something like this table exists to function, where they would just do session.sql and maybe check to see if a table exists in the information schema. But we can now, with our new Python management API, do that programmatically. So we're able to go through and with kind of native Python objects, we can go through and now look at, things like, do objects exist? But we can also create them. So you can create objects within Snowflake as well. So really the goal here is to be able to do all of your work in Python in a notebook, like you're comfortable with and want to do. So
I think that's really powerful. I think that the fact that you can leverage, the Pythonic way, right? Like and be able to use, use the tools that you're most accustomed to. So
yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, this has been definitely another, very popular, very highly requested feature. So that's pretty exciting. And then what we've had with Snowpark, so I won't spend time on this, won't spend much time here, but just your standard data frame API. So if you work in PySpark and you're doing your work, your queries, your aggregations, your data engineering work in data frames, we have that with Snowpark. And so you can see all those same operators, the same syntax you would use is available in Snowflake. But the difference here is this doesn't run in Spark. The Snowpark library actually runs it all in our native Snowflake warehouses, our compute clusters. And it runs faster. Our query engine is a modern vectorized query engine, which is in most cases outperforms Spark. And so the same code, when customers migrate this into Snowflake, find that it runs much faster within Snowflake, which translates ultimately into less cost and more efficiency. So same data frame API. I've got I can do a merge. It's just showing you how to do true incremental processing. So if the table doesn't exist, I'll create it. But if it does, I'll do an upsert operation. So we'll merge the changes into it. And then at the end, I just had a quick little debugging statement that shows this aggregated table only has 2 rows. It's very simple, but that is correct. So those are our 2 pipelines. If I flip back here, you can see kind of those 2 pieces. And so now what I'll show you is how we can orchestrate these components. But anything else before I jump into the orchestration?
No, I think this is great. And so I do see some questions coming in about which I think going to this next section, orchestration, is going to answer exactly the questions, which is, well, somebody already asked, can you schedule a notebook to run? And so that's exactly what we're about to do. So let's dive right in.
Love it. So before I actually show you how to do it programmatically, you can also do it through the UI. So here in my notebook, there's actually this little calendar icon at the top right, which allows you to schedule a notebook, through the UI. So I can come in and look at different schedules or run history or create a new one. And this is where I'm actually going to define, the scheduling frequency and the name and all that. So I can do it here. And what under the covers, what happens is we actually create a task in Snowflake, which, if you're familiar with Snowflake, tasks are our orchestration capability. So if you're familiar with things like Airflow or Prefect or Dagster, those are commercial tools for orchestration that are broad and generic. Tasks are within Snowflake, and they're specific to Snowflake, and they're that same kind of capability, though. You can create a DAG of tasks, and they can all run on a schedule. And I'll show you how to do it programmatically through Python here. So that's the cool part. And then before that, just wanted to show, so those, if you remember those log messages that we added with our logger in Python, you can see here, this is just a sample query, but we have this event table that I can query, and I can see all of my info messages that I recorded as we ran those 2 packages. So just to kind of show how that works. Now, when it comes to orchestrating, again, I'm going to show you, earlier I talked about our Python management API, and we used it to see if a table existed. What we're going to do here is actually create a set of a whole DAG, so directed acyclic graph. That's a term that's often used within the kind of computer science space to define a particular data structure. And this is how we're going to connect all of our tasks together. So I'm going to run a couple of these cells. This is just going to get us a Python session. We're going to first deploy here to our development schema. And then we're going to actually deploy it. And so talk about a live demo. Right before this, I looked and I ran this and got this error. It does work. It just gives us this error as well. So this must just be some temporary thing as we're maybe rolling out some changes. But I want to explain this. If you've used Airflow before, Airflow, the V1 of the Airflow DAG API in Python, we've basically replicated that with our Python libraries. So you can see here, I'm creating a DAG with 2 tasks, and then I'm defining the dependencies, and then I'm deploying it. And this is very similar to how you would do it in Airflow, but I can do this all through Python. And the tricky part is, or the power of this is, I'm defining these relationships, which can be very complex. And Snowflake handles all of the kind of bookkeeping that has to happen. There's a lot of stuff with tasks where you have to suspend them and create them in the right order and all of that, where Snowflake does that all for you. And actually, all we're doing here at the end of the day is each task is calling execute notebook, and then passing some, and then setting the warehouse. So that's the definition. So with that, I actually have, and I'll flip back over. I've got, if you go to the databases here, I have now, if I refresh, some tasks as well. And I'll show you the tasks. So if we go to here, so again, Snowsite, there's a ton of capabilities within the user experience from kind of an operational perspective. Here I can see a DAG of my, how these all relate. I can actually even kick this off. So we'll just run it real quick. But you can see it actually, so I showed you that we created 2 tasks. It actually created a third one, which is this root task. And that just happens with the library so that you can have 2, initial kind of tasks, 2 or more, because you have to have a parent always. So that kind of gives you that ability to have that first level have multiple tasks. And this then also has a run history, so you can go and see the execution. And it's probably finished by now. So there we go. We have all of those tasks have run. So we have a whole pipeline now that is essentially 2 notebooks that are now scheduled with tasks and will be run on a regular basis. So very cool.
Yeah, it is awesome.
And
I love how you can do it both programmatically and via the UI. I think all the visualizations and the observability that you have into that pipeline that you've created is impressive. So it's cool to see. The observability is something that's really needed to be able to diagnose if something ever goes wrong in your pipeline, like maybe the data source has changed, and so like it's breaking some point in your pipeline. So how do you diagnose that? Well, you need to have observability into that pipeline, and so it's cool to see your run history and different things like that.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of other stuff. I'm showing you, or showing folks this view for a particular task, but we also, under the monitoring section, have all kinds of, you're probably familiar with query history, which is one of my favorite features initially when I first learned about Snowflake. But we also have task history as well. So you can actually see, this is a view kind of for your whole account of tasks runs and when they failed. And you can see some of the stuff I did before our session today. And same with logs. We can actually start looking at and filtering out all of our logs. And you can see my notebook here, but all of this is also available through more advanced tools. So
I love it.
And quick time check. So the next step I was going to show is the deploying through a kind of DevOps pipeline. Are we good to do that real quick? Do folks want to see that?
Yeah, let's go. Let's do it quick, and let's try and let's do it.
All right. Hopefully this is what, something folks are interested in and excited about. So let me go through and show you. What I'm going to do is just make a change. So in Notebook 7 at the bottom, I'm just going to comment out this line. That's it. So, and actually, maybe what I'm going to do is just change this to 100. And I'll explain that why in a second. So I made a change, really simple. You can see already that it's telling me, Snowsite's telling me this has been modified. And I can do this push to get operation here. So I'm going to push this change into get. And I need to actually flip over really quick here. Do you see Visual Studio Code here, or do you see my web browser still?
We see your web browser.
Okay, that's good, because then I can copy this. Okay, so here I just had to copy the personal access token. All right, so I'm going to commit this message. I'll just call it demo, and I'll push this change. So what I've done is actually now made a change to this notebook, and I'm which was in my dev branch, and I'm pushing this change back into my dev branch. And that's been done successfully. So that's another one of these integrations with Git that are really cool. And now if I flip over here to our repository in GitHub, you can see if I flip to my dev branch, my change has been committed here, and I'm going to open a pull request. So what I'm showing you is going to be really simple. Again, I'm not, in a production and a real world deployment setup, you're going to have much more advanced deployment pipelines. I want to keep this really simple for the demo so you can see how it works. But what I'm doing is just going to create a pull request that merges those changes from dev to main. And you can see the change is just, I put an extra 0 on that limit statement. So that's the only thing I changed. And I can now create this pull request. And here, this is like what I was referring to earlier. Your pull requests are going to have much more, structure around them, reviewers, different checks that happen. In this case, it's really simple, but you can imagine this process. So you've gone through your process, you reviewed it, and now you want to merge this into your main branch. Now at that point, GitHub Actions kicks off, and I've defined this GitHub Actions pipeline. And actually, while that's going, let me just quickly show you. So out here in GitHub Actions, we've got this workflow defined. And it's really simple. Again, this is not a production version, but the idea is anytime we're pushing to main, we're going to run some steps. So the first thing we're going to do is just set up Python, install some packages. And then really the key is down here. I have some secrets set in GitHub Actions, but what I'm running is I'm using the snow command. This is our Snowflake CLI tool. So this is actually also a new tool that's available for developers and for operational use cases like this, where I'm actually running, and I'm running a SQL query through it. This is a pretty powerful tool. It can do much more than just running SQL queries. It can help build and deploy all of our complex objects like Snowpark objects, Streamlit objects, container services objects, native apps, all of those. But what I'm doing is just refreshing, and then this command here, this execute immediate from, should be familiar. This is what we ran at the very beginning of the demo, except for this time I'm passing in prod details instead of dev details. So same script and source control, same command, but now I can deploy both dev versions of things and prod version. So pretty neat. And I'll show you this should have finished. And if we look at the output, it did finish and it successfully deployed my notebooks. And just to show you here now, if I go back to my notebooks, if you remember, we only had 2 before, but if I refresh, I've now got my prod versions of those notebooks deployed here, all through an automated process.
I love it. I mean, this is what you've built here is very powerful in terms of the capabilities, and robust in terms of the tools and the flow that you've used. I love seeing the Jinja templating and the various SQL scripts. Like it's very repeatable and powerful. So this is awesome. So I know we don't have that much time left. What I want to do now is open this up for questions to the broad audience. And as we wait for questions, Jeremiah, tell us one more time, where do people go to run this quick start themselves? How do they get their hands on this quick start? And what should they do as kind of immediate next steps after this live stream? What should they do to learn more? Yeah, perfect. So first thing that I want to show you, so here we'll go back to the quick start. If you haven't been there already, quickstarts.snowflake.com. This is a great site to it's easy to remember, obviously, but it's a great site to have even bookmarked. Every one of these quick starts, like we talked about earlier, is a step-by-step guide, and they go through detail, and it's Snowflake features, partner tools, all kinds of things. I have a lot in here on DevOps and data engineering. And the example that we just went through is called Getting Started with Data Engineering for Using Snowflake Notebooks. And this is, so you can see the title there. This is the one I just went through most of it. There's a few things I didn't cover, but this is here. You can go through this on your own, as soon as we're done. So that's a great way to get started. And it gives you just a way to actually, create a notebook, run it, check it in. Like by the time you go through this and get hands-on with it yourself, you'll have kind of been through all the different, at least initially, quickly, but kind of through all the different features and
ins and outs. And that's a great place to start.
I love it. Well, awesome. Awesome. Let's see, any questions from the audience?
Yeah. What was your favorite part? Anything?
My favorite part? Oh man, there's so many good parts. One, it's like you always got to call out. It's so simple, but I love the fact that you're using dark mode. So that's one. But two, the other is I love the fact that you are able to have this automated flow that leverages Git and GitHub, right? I think being able to leverage kind of software engineering best practices and merging kind of the tool sets here. I think it goes back to the whole idea of using and bringing what you're most accustomed with, right? And another example of that in your demo was the ability to use the Python APIs rather than SQL, right? So it's again, you're able to just kind of do it all in kind of pure Python, and then having to run a SQL query. So that's awesome to see. So one question from the audience: is there any performance difference if we use Snowflake Notebooks over Snowflake procedures using SQL?
So, and it's like the very last minute, this question comes in. It's a big question. So let me say a couple of things, but there's probably a lot to unpack there. The notebook itself really isn't adding to the performance. I mean, the notebook's a way to run, cells of Python. It's the Python you're running that's the thing that matters. So whether you ran that Python through VS Code or through a notebook, the mechanism you use to run it doesn't really affect it. So that's the first part. So then the question really becomes that Python code that you're running, how does that compare to maybe doing it in SQL? And that's also kind of a deep question. There's a lot of factors that go into that. The thing I think maybe is most important to point out within Snowpark, so this is our Snowflake Python data frame experience that I showed earlier, all of that gets translated into SQL. And so you can actually look in your query. This is kind of a pro tip for folks if you haven't seen it. You can actually go into the query history in Snowflake, and you can see the SQL queries that get generated from those data frame expressions. And so because of that, it's generally very fast. Like that's what I was saying earlier, that customers, as they move to Snowpark and move those workloads from Spark and PySpark, find they run much faster in Snowflake because our query engine is much faster. So now that compared to this, if you wrote the SQL yourself, it just depends on what you're writing. So there's definitely some nuance there, but hopefully a couple of those things help at least kind of get you going the right direction.
Awesome. And that's a great answer too. I mean, so to reiterate, it's not really the environment that it's running in, but it's the actual implementation of the function that you're running. And I think that's well stated and well put. So another question that's come in is, what is the difference between using session versus cursor using Python as ETL?
Yeah, so there's a expression. I assume when they say cursor, there's an expression R-bar. I don't know if you've ever heard that. It's like a classic data engineering expression, but row by agonizing row is what it stands for. And the idea is that, procedural programming kind of things, you loop through stuff. And when it comes to databases and data platforms, you want to do set-based operations. You don't want to do things in a very sequential way. So that you can definitely, like with even our Python connector before, you can do kind of the R-bar approach, right? You can loop through a set of records and process and do things, or you can do that as a set-based SQL operation. So it really depends. I mean, generally you want to do it as a set-based operation. And so that's generally like with the session object, you can do the data frame, like I showed you that data frame expression, and that's all essentially a set-based operation that gets pushed into SQL. So that's the preferred approach over doing like a cursor kind of iterating approach.
Well, awesome. So we are at time. So I want to say a big thank you, Jeremiah, for joining me here today, giving us this fantastic demo, walking us through how to use Snowflake's native notebook environment and setup to create these data pipelines. Even showing automated CI/CD in there and things like that. So thank you for joining me. And I also want to say a big thank you to all the viewers, for your questions. And if you have any other questions or your immediate next steps on where to go, quick review is check out the quick start on quickstarts.snowflake.com. And you can also view the entire end-to-end solution with a video, architectural diagram, things like that on the Snowflake Solution Center at developers.snowflake.com. So with that, thank you, everybody, and see you next time.
See y'all.